we're here to talk about reimagining carbon markets with blockchain and elephants. By the end of this webinar, 3 to 4 elephants will have been killed by poachers by the end of this webinar. Across Western Africa, more than 2/3 of the forest elephants have been killed in the last decade, ranging from 95% in the Democratic Republic of Congo to 30% in Gabon, according to the Guardian newspaper. And that's for about $40,000. That is the value of their tusks for which they're killed, according to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why are forest elephants important. Now, I'm making a distinction here, not the savanna elephants, the forest elephants, which is the purpose of the focus today. So deforestation in Africa is happening at 4 times faster than the global rate, resulting in an average loss of 40,000 square kilometers per year. Now, what does that mean? Now, I'm sure all of you know the Great Nile River that is in eastern part of Africa. What you may not know is that, for example, Ethiopia is looking to build a dam. And in response to that, Egypt, which is at the mouth of the Nile River, is threatening to bomb that dam because they are feared they're going to lose some of the water supply from the Nile River. Both of those countries, though, failed to understand one big risk to the Nile River, which is in the Western Africa, you have this amazing rainforest whose humidity actually powers the flow of air currents that brings rainwater to the Nile River from the humidity that rises up from that rainforest. That elephant, that African forest elephant, is what's considered the great gardeners of the rainforest. If they disappear, deforestation of that rainforest will accelerate significantly. If they disappear, that forest will disappear. That forest disappears, the Nile River goes dry. But yet we as humans, we only think of, let's just bomb each other out. That's the easiest answer to everything. And we don't think about how everything is interconnected, how that elephant is critical for the forest, and that forest humidity is critical for the Nile rivers for it to be able to flow with water. And this happens is because forest elephants' appetite and migratory habits makes them the great gardeners of the forest. Each forest elephant can stimulate a net increase in carbon capture in Central African rainforest of 9,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide per kilometer squared. And according to the IMF, that carbon value of a single forest elephant is $1.75 million. We have today a market that values nature when it's dead, i.e. $40,000 for tusks. But we do not have a market that values nature for it being alive. And I'm grateful for the IMF to have done that exercise to prove to us that the services rendered by an elephant, African forest elephant, in terms of carbon sequestration and carbon services makes it worth $1.75 million. So 3 of us decide to do something about it, to create a team that can build a market that recognizes the value for living nature instead of just a dead nature. So it's got myself. I'm the startup man. This is my 7th startup initiative. I run InsureBlocks, which is a boutique consultancy firm on how to use blockchain, but also a podcast. So we've done close to 140 podcasts, not just in insurance, but in all kinds of industries, supply chain, pharma, banking, food and agriculture, you name it. We've had all kinds of institutions from the European Commission, the World Food Program, the WTO, the OECD. We've all had them on our program. And I've partnered was the author of the white paper at the IMF on the valuation of elephants, but he also did a valuation of the great whales. The great whales, when they're hunted, they're worth $50,000 in meat, but their carbon services and carbon sequestration makes them worth $2 million. And that gentleman is Ralph Chamy, assistant director at the IMF. And our third co-founder is Ian Redman, who is an internationally recognized wildlife consultant and conservationist. He provides a lot of reports to the United Nations in terms of how can we protect wildlife. What is clear to me is that in spite of all the huge efforts for decades by conservationists around the world, we have not been able to successfully stop the tide of species who are going ethnic, who are disappearing, extinction, or climate change getting worse. So our idea is, how can you transform the same market forces that have a tendency of destroying nature by using them in a way to preserve nature? So we've built a vision together, which is to build a resilient, equitable, and sustainable economy underpinned by a regenerative nature and thriving local communities. And this is done by reimagining the carbon markets. And we are for change. We are here to transform the carbon exchange markets into a driving force for good and bringing transparency, traceability, and trust to them. And we're not a charity. We're going to be a profit-making organization where all the profits are reinvested back into identifying future opportunities to regenerate nature, raising living standards, whilst growing our economies. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a race against time. Climate change is accelerating. And the more we can, as our platform, can invest in other, what I call living assets. So start off with the African forest elephant and then move on to other keystone species, such as the gorilla, the giraffe, the rhinoceros. These are species who have a big impact on their ecosystem. And all this will be done with the help of blockchain, which I'll be talking about in this presentation. Now, for those of you who don't know about the existing carbon markets, but they're kind of new, they're very murky, they lack transparency, and they're full of middlemen that are here to make a quick buck. Of course, hearing all those words, you obviously think blockchain, and I would have to agree with you. And our platform is here to provide the 3 T's: transparency, traceability, and trust. So with regards to transparency, it's about trading carbon credits should be transparent. You should be able to see exactly who you're trading with, as all transactions are recorded and accessible to permission parties on an immutable and distributed ledger. They're traceable. So understanding where funding is spent demonstrates accountability. The distributed ledger allows users to follow the process, see where their funds are, the status of the assets, and how those funds are dispersed and reinvested. And trusted. Creating a greater sense of trust underpinned by the dual pillars of transparency and traceability that carbon credits are a force for good. Turning dollars from carbon credits into action which protects and repopulates existing living assets whilst increasing living standards. And I'll explain to you how we're going to do that. So what I mean by in terms of local communities, so the carbon credits that will be sold will be used first and foremost to defend the elephant and to take care of their welfare. Let me remove, this theory or this hypothesis, this myth that poachers are hungry farmers or hungry individuals who just need to make a quick buck. Poachers are actually trained, armed mercenaries who sell the ivory to support criminal activities. They're heavily armed, and thus you need heavily armed wildlife rangers to protect them. But of course, a lot of those carbon credits will also be used to support the local communities that live within the vicinity of the elephant. So whether it's building a school, providing higher education for girls, buying solar panels for electricity, building a well, a health facility. By doing all this, we're incentivizing the local community to be our eyes and ears about what's happening, to tell us, when there's people who could be poachers who are entering. Because if you think about it, they're here to take care of the elephant for the elephant to take care of them. Because that asset is worth $1.75 million over 60 years. And that equals to $80 a day. With that, you can do quite a lot. But the thing is, this project sits within a much wider context, which is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And our project will hit 6 of them. Number 1, no poverty. That $80 a day can help provide full-time employment and micro-investment transactions. Decent work and economic growth. Reduce inequalities. And of course, by sustaining keystone species such as the elephant and others, we help to fight climate action, and we're here to support life below water and life on land. So here comes the very interesting part, which I think is much more of interest to you guys, is how does this all work? So we're going to work on the assumption, let's say Google, for argument's sake, or actually Stripe. Stripe might be a better example because Stripe has already been spending over $1 million, I believe, in carbon offsetting measures. So here, let's say Stripe wishes to offset X metric tons of carbon over Y number of years. So it goes through our carbon calculator, and our carbon calculator effectively looks at how many elephants are not servicing an existing contract for another firm that are of a certain age and are within a certain type of forest, because all these influences the elephant's capacity to perform its carbon sequestration services and carbon capture. Now, I want to make something very clear. We are not privatizing animals. We are simply paying for the services they render by simply being alive and performing their normal duties that they do, as a living creature. Once we've identified the living assets that are here to service that contract, then Stripe would send, let's say, $1 million into our escrow account, where it would sit there. Each of those elephants are equipped with a mixture of direct and indirect sensors. And what those sensors are here to collect is effectively 2 pieces of information. Is the elephant still alive? And is the elephant still in a zoo, in the forest? Sorry, we don't want people who say, "Hey, I've got elephants in a zoo" to be part of the system, because they can't perform the services they render because they have to be within the forest, and of course they have to be alive. If they are, then at the end of every day we issue an asset-backed token, and those tokens that are issued are backed by the money that sits in the escrow account. Now, what happens with those tokens? So those tokens goes, as I said early on, initially to the forest rangers, straight into their mobile phones. The other tokens, the other outstanding tokens, go to the local community as micro investments for them to determine how they wish to use those funds. So then a message is sent back to us saying how many tokens have been issued. Now, these tokens can be spent at locations that have registered to be on our platform. So they can be spent at a certain number of merchants. They can be spent at certain utility firms or educational facilities or construction companies for the micro investments. Those tokens are collected by those merchants and utility companies and so on. And at the end of every month, they send us the tokens back, and a reconciliation exercise is done between tokens that were issued with tokens that have been collected. Once that reconciliation exercise has been done, then we will send the cash Why is this system important? First of all, we're giving Stripe a transparent, traceable, and trusted manner for them to offset their carbon emissions. As a permission party, they can see how the funds are being used. Point number one. Point number two, they get a CSR message at the end of every month. CSR is corporate social responsibility. They get to see how their money is being used to provide full-time employment to forest rangers, but also it provides the kind of investments that are needed in the local communities, whether it is, as I said, building a health facility, building roads, or building any kind of other infrastructure activities. And that is very powerful for those kind of enterprises to get. They get effectively twice, the return for their money. But the thing is, again, how does this project sit within the wider climate change? And the important thing is that we're stopping the killing of an asset that is playing an important part in carbon capture and carbon sequestration. But also, very importantly, we're raising the living standards of the local community. Many of these individuals are unbanked. We can help them by becoming bankable. So this creates a very win-win-win-win kind of relationship. So first of all, it's a win for the elephant. The elephant is protected, doesn't get killed. It's a win for the enterprise. The enterprise gets a clear, transparent, and trusted mechanism for offsetting their carbon emissions, but also they get a corporate social responsibility message. It's a win for the local community because their living standards are being lifted. And you know what? It's also a win for the state in which those local communities reside, because now these people are bankable. They can be taxed as they're earning income. So it's a win for all of these parties. So effectively, what we've done is that we're taking this toxic asset, carbon, and with the help of the elephant, we're transforming it into carbon for social good. So all this idea came to me literally 2.5 months ago. And since then, what I've realized is that the problems we as a society are facing, this climate change problem, is magnitudes bigger than the problem we're facing with COVID-19. This is magnitudes bigger. And it cannot be resolved only by technology. It cannot be resolved only by science or by politics or by legal frameworks. It requires a multidisciplinary approach to a very complex problem. And I'm very grateful that up to now, we've got 50 volunteers who have joined to help us launch a pilot in 2021 in the Western African state of Gabon that has 45,000 African forest elephants. And out of those 50 volunteers, we've got academics, scientists, economists, entrepreneurs, technologists, students, lawyers, marketeers, financiers, and I'm sure I've forgotten a lot more into that. Because this is, as I said, it's a multidisciplinary approach that is required. And these people are coming from all around the world, from India, from Russia, from South Africa, from Australia, from IT, from all across Europe, from Canada, Brazil, US. And as a father of 2 daughters, I'm absolutely delighted. It's a 50-50% gender split in terms of both the leadership and the volunteers. And we've got a message for everyone, which is we have 3 principles: be human, have love, and give hope. So I'll invite you, all of you, of course, to join us, bring us your unique skills, and together let's build a resilient, equitable, and sustainable economy underpinned by regenerative nature and thriving local communities. I'll happily take your questions now.
Thank you, Walid. Attendees, if you have any questions, please type them into the question box in your Zoom panel. We'll be happy to take it.
Until perhaps some questions come in, I'll share a little bit more for you guys. So the thing is, launching such initiatives, requires a lot of work. And we have this amazing group of volunteers who are here to make it realize. And so, thank you, Darsh, for your question. I mean, at the moment, as I said, this is a global approach in terms of volunteers. Because my experience, I did not mention it, but this is my 7th startup. So I've built many startups. And what is key for a successful initiative is to have a sniper focus. You got to be very focused in terms of what you're doing. So we're focusing to start initially in the country of Gabon, which is in Western Africa, simply because we've had good conversations there with the Minister of Forestry, who is giving us his blessing to launch a pilot in the southeast part of his country in a national park to use his elephants there. But this is a solution that can be implemented in many countries. So once we successfully launched a pilot, we want to be able to scale this project to cover as many elephants as possible, to cover other living assets such as the giraffe, the gorilla, the great whales, and so on, and also to do it in other countries, of course. So how can people in India bring value to this project? Well, we actually already have individuals from India. This is a global crisis that we're facing. Climate change is not something that is only being affected in Europe or in North America or in India. It's a global element. So whatever carbon capture services that can be done by an elephant, that service is not being done just for Gabon. It's being done across the world. So you guys have unique skills. You have unique perspectives on things, and I would invite you to bring that uniqueness to our team. So yes, Sonali, of course, we are going to be spreading this to other wild animals. But as I said earlier on, as a startup, you have to be focused. The biggest challenge in one of the biggest challenges, there are many challenges in this project, is how do you monitor the well-being and location of a wild animal? It's actually incredibly difficult. I'll give you an example. The elephant. If you want to monitor their well-being, what are you going to do? You're going to put a sensor on them. If you want to put a sensor on them, you have to shoot them with a dart to put them to sleep. Between the time that you shoot them and them falling asleep, they probably would have run 2 kilometers in the forest, and they're kind of sleepy, and they might actually kill themselves. First point. Second point, you've got to run after it in a forest. It's very hard. And third point, elephants are very protective creatures, and they're very strong family structures. So if you try to shoot one elephant to put him to sleep, you guarantee that the other elephants in his family will protect it. So that's a very difficult situation. So we have to work with a range of different sensors, from satellites to camera traps in the forest to DNA testing of their dung. There's all kinds of things. So because of that challenge, we're starting first with the elephant, and then to see how we can expand it to other living animals. Does this propose a new blockchain network for token distribution, or are you using? No, so we're not going to use crypto. So we're not looking to build a cryptocurrency, not at all. I'm sure you will appreciate that in some markets, in some industries, people are still very fearsome of the whole world crypto. And one of the target industry, of course, that we're going to be aiming is the financial industry, because they do have to offset their carbon emissions. So that's the reason why we're part of the reason why we're not using cryptocurrency. So the tokens are only meant as a kind of a coupon or physical digital representation of the money that sits in the crypto account. That is the only purpose in how we're using it. How can we convince the locals regarding blockchain? Well, the thing is, one thing I've learned, remember, I've done close to 140 podcasts on blockchain. And the one thing I can tell you is you don't need to talk about blockchain. Just like, if I call you on your mobile, I don't need to find out what kind of processor you have within your mobile. It just works, right? So when you talk about blockchain, when it's relevant to talk about blockchain, you don't need to talk about it. I think where it makes sense to explain is the token, is how that token is backed by currency. Yes, that will need to be explained. And thank God, today there is, coupons, effectively are a form of token. So we would explain it in that manner, that this is similar to a coupon. It's just a digital representation of that coupon. What about using similar technology platform and tokenization principles for afforestation for planting of more trees? Yes, so there are a number of awesome initiatives that already exist today or are about to launch who have similar principles to us, where the carbon offsetting is being done to trees, and some are actually being done to soil, where it is incentivizing farmers to do something in terms of their soil. I'm not exactly sure, that can help in terms of the carbon offsetting. These are all great initiatives, and we need as many initiatives as possible. We just happen to have decided to focus on the animals because they have, in our opinion, a great impact on their ecosystem. Because the elephant itself, doesn't capture a large amount of carbon, but it is the services it does within the forest. I'll give you an example. So it destroys a lot of shrub. It destroys a lot of baby trees. That ensures that some of the core trees, their trunk gets bigger and they become more powerful. Bigger trees capture more carbon. So that's one of the things they do. The second thing they do is that the fruits of those trees that they eat are very big, have huge seeds, and only an elephant can digest that seed. And when they poop that seed out, with the poo, it acts as a magnificent fertilizer for that seed to become a brand new tree. So that's part of the whole ecosystem of how the elephant influences carbon capture and carbon sequestration services. Yes, the slides will be shareable. I'll be happy to distribute it, to you guys as easy as possible. And if you want to be part of this initiative, please, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll happily introduce you to the platform and to the team. I'll share a little bit more information with you guys, actually. So let me share my screen. So it's a project that's being led, by volunteers from all around the world. So we created a mirror board, and you can see we've got a vision, our stripe line. What do we do? What do we stand for? And then we have some key milestones that we have to achieve. And we've created 13 working groups for the 50 volunteers. So we have a business development working group that is here to recruit enterprises. And we've had a number of great conversations with enterprise for the pilot. We have an admin working group, partnerships working group, so we can partner with the WWF, for example, marketing working group. Ethics is the most important working group. They're here to make sure that whatever we do is done within a very high level of values, both internally and externally. The economist working group is here to understand and build valuations of those living assets. The science working group is here to determine, how much carbon does each living asset can capture. Sensors, as I mentioned, what is the kind of right sensor technology that is required to monitor those living assets in a non-intrusive way. The blockchain working group is self-explanatory. Local communities, we're going to be setting up local offices in each of the countries in which we operate in to make sure that we don't have a situation where it's the north dictating to the south what to do. No, we want to engage with the local people and set up those local offices. Legal working group, and of course an investment working group to provide us the capital to get this initiative, to the next level. So we are very structured. We're growing by 1 or 2 new volunteers roughly per day. It's kind of accelerating at the moment, which just brings its own challenge. But this is something we're very happy about. Can we see the demo of the pilot? Well, as I said, the pilot will be launching towards the end of next year. These things take a lot of time. We're very lucky that we have a international mobile operator that's going to be launching a hackathon in Q1 next year with us to help develop the sensor technology that is required, because it doesn't quite exist today. Any thoughts other than the CO2 footprint to measure the environmental impact? So yes, Dennis, very good question, because there are many other things that an elephant does, in terms of biodiversity. Biodiversity is very important, but on problem that there's not a market on which you can put a value to it. What we've done is that we've looked at the carbon offsetting, the carbon capture and carbon sequestration that elephant can do, because there is a market for carbon offsetting. So we wanted to make sure that we could use today's market forces in a manner that could help to preserve the animal. But yes, my hope and is that we're going to get to a stage as a society where we start putting real value to biodiversity, and that will of course add to the elephant. The one other thing that I want to add is that today's price of carbon is roughly $26. The IMF is predicting that's going to move up to $75 by 2030. So imagine what kind of valuation that's going to do to the elephant. It's going to skyrocket. A bit skeptical with carbon market, which is dropping. Well, the carbon market, Dennis, is going up and down because it's very lacks of transparent, a lot of traceability. However, there's over $100 billion that firms, at least in Europe, have put aside for carbon offsetting. They haven't put the money invested in today because they don't feel confident in the existing carbon markets that are in establishment. Our hope is that ours will provide the confidence to do that. We are a contributor to the Mark Carney, which is the ex Bank of England governor, who now leads a UN task force on how to reinvent the carbon markets. And we're a contributor to that. And we believe there's an opportunity to make them a lot clearer, and we will demonstrate that. How can we convince the locals regarding blockchain and token assets? So yeah, as I said, Mubin, that we're not here to convince them about blockchain, but we are here to talk to them about token assets in a manner which is similar to a coupon, so that when they receive that token, when they show it to the till register at their local grocer that is signed up on our platform, it can be scanned and they can get value for it in terms of products that they wish to purchase. Any other questions? Let me see if I've missed anybody else. No, I think I've covered all the other questions. So if there's anything else, please don't hesitate. Yeah, is there any website for this? Very funny story, Vimal, where actually just came up with our name 2 or 3 days ago. Finding a name for this initiative where the URL is still available was a huge challenge. So we've only came up with that, and we hope to have a website up and running within a week and a half. One of the beauties about having 50 volunteers is that we've got a lot of resources. And one of the challenges, of course, is because as volunteers, you have to work a little bit at everyone's timing, which has an impact.